Senator, welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me on.
Senator, I'm not a criminal defense lawyer. I did represent one person once in court, and I've had to argue a few United States attorneys out of indicting clients over land use matters, but I don't know anything about criminal law. You're on Intel, and you're a lawyer. When do you expect the trial of Donald Trump to begin?
Well, Hugh, first off, let me say I'm disappointed with Merrick Garland's indictment of former President Trump, partly because he's not just former President Trump. He's also the leading candidate for the presidency of the opposition party. And indicting the opposition party's leading candidate is a step that's more reminiscent of third world banana republics and the greatest republic known in the history of mankind. It's not something that should be done on edge cases or stretching legal theories, only on ironclad, serious matters in which the law has been applied equally in a fair-handed manner. And I don't see how any neutral observer could look at, say, Donald Trump's case contrast to Hillary Clinton's case and think that the law has been enforced in an even-handed manner, but rather applying a double standard. I mean, what Hillary Clinton did was much worse than what Donald Trump is alleged to have done. Donald Trump is alleged to have taken documents of historical value and shown them to people at Mar-a-Lago who didn't have security clearances. Hillary Clinton had set up an unsecure server in her house, conducting diplomacy in real time on it, on the nation's most sensitive matters, that the former deputy director of CIA said on your show 8 years ago almost certainly was compromised in real time by the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians or other adversaries of the United States. So I share the deep disappointment and concern of so many Arkansans at the double standard that seems to be at work here. As for the trial itself, Hugh, I mean, I'm not obviously privy to all the legal details. I just read what I see in the news. It would appear that President Trump has several culpable motions to dismiss or to exclude evidence that could undermine the case. I also note that the indictment talks a lot about the Espionage Act, but never says a word about the Presidential Records Act. And while the Espionage Act covers how you or others might have to handle classified materials or the charges you might face, former presidents are somewhat different. That's why we have the Presidential Records Act that governs how they handled classified or unclassified materials in relation to the National Archives. So I also would imagine there'll be motions filed by the former president's lawyers about the propriety of what happened under the Presidential Records Act, not just the Espionage Act. So I think you could be looking at a trial pretty far off into the future, certainly in 2024, if not beyond.
Now, I've got one question. You're on Intel, and if you bring on a staffer and you want to put them onto the Intel committee, how long does it take them to get cleared these days to get that position?
Well, Hugh, if they're coming in cold, let's say, and not coming in from, say, an intelligence agency or another committee where they have a clearance, it could take a number of months. And I think the point you may be driving at here is there's a lot of people who are going to have to be cleared to review the materials at issue here. Not least, I would assume 12 jurors. I don't think under the Espionage Act it's fair to just stipulate, for instance, to the jury that, don't worry, the government is telling you that these documents and their possession and potential disclosure cause grave harm to national security. I think that would probably be a factual question for the jury to determine under suitable legal instructions from the judge. So that's yet another possibility of delay in this trial. And that's just the jurors, say nothing of judges and clerks and courtroom administrative personnel and lawyers and so forth.
Oh, it's absurd to think. I just told Molly Hemingway, I think Sheikh Khalid Mohammed has a better chance of being tried before the election of 2024 than Donald Trump does. And given that fact, does that go to your question about the time? I mean, I just cannot believe they did this. I expected my first take given on, because I read too much of the Blue Bubble, Joy Behar, Keith Olbermann, the New York Times, I expected they were going to allege he had sold these documents to a foreign power. And so I said, that's it? And were you surprised by the indictment?
Hugh, I wish I could say I was surprised. I mean, the indictment is shocking, but coming from Joe Biden's Department of Justice with Merrick Garland, I can't say that it's surprising. This is the Department of Justice that conducted FBI raids in the homes of pro-life activists outside Philadelphia who were then charged with federal crimes, yet acquitted by a jury in barely an hour. Or the FBI or the Department of Justice that sicked the FBI and federal investigators on protesters at school board meetings in Northern Virginia. Hugh, this is the Department of Justice when investigating one of its own, Rachel Rollins, the now disgraced former U.S. attorney in Massachusetts, refused to prosecute her even after the department's own inspector general said she lied repeatedly during its investigation and requested prosecution. And Merrick Garland refused to prosecute this radical, disgraced former U.S. attorney in just 3 weeks, 2 weeks of which were the Christmas and New Year's vacation. So I wish I could say I was surprised by this shocking development, but I'm not, because we've seen the uneven application of the federal from Merrick Garland.
Your colleague, Senator Grassley, went to the floor yesterday and talked about the FBI allegations leveled against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. I don't know the merits of that. Anyone can file a report, and anyone can say, I've got telephone calls. But he has clearly lost faith in the FBI. Is that a generalized situation now, Senator Cotton?
I think that many Americans have lost faith in the upper reaches of the FBI, whether it was under Jim Comey or now under Christopher Wray. We continue to see very, very questionable conduct. I mean, what Chuck Grassley was on the Senate floor yesterday is when members of Congress who are reviewing a document by an alleged whistleblower about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden taking bribes from foreigners, that redacted was not just the names and identities of persons, but also the fact that there were allegedly 17 audio recordings of Joe and Hunter Biden discussing this very matter. Now, I can understand why the names or identities of others might need to be redacted to protect intelligence sources or criminal investigations. How on earth could you make the case that you need to redact the fact that one of them claims to have audio recordings of the Bidens? That's not a sensitive piece of information that could compromise an investigation. That's only sensitive because it's explosive for the investigations of Hunter Biden and the Biden family. I think Christopher Wray has yet again more questions to answer about the conduct of the upper reaches of FBI.
All right, now if I can switch subjects. Politico reporting this morning that Admiral Paparo is going to be nominated to be the CNO. There's also a story this morning in the Wall Street Journal that Xi Jinping has threatened America twice in the last month, telling the Chinese people that they have to be ready for very terrible times. I believe him when he says that. What do you make about the nomination of Paparo, an aviator, and what do you think about General Secretary Xi's warning to us?
Well, if President Biden does in fact nominate Admiral Paparo to be the chief of naval operations, I think that would be a welcome choice. He's the chief admiral of our fleet in the Pacific. He has spent years confronting the China threats. I think he understands what the Navy needs to do to grow and modernize to deter Chinese aggression, because I think we should take Xi Jinping at his word. Time and again throughout history, people fail to take dictators at their word. When Xi Jinping says Chinese people need to be ready for war, when Adolf Hitler wrote Mein Kampf or said that the German people need Lebensraum in the East, when the Kaiser said that we're going to chart a new course and we want our place in the sun. Time and again, Western leaders stuck their head in the sand and didn't want to face unpleasant realities and bear certain costs, no doubt costs, to deter war and to preserve the peace, but costs that paled in comparison to the ultimate cost that came in World War I or World War II, or what could be the worst, most destructive event in human history, a war between Communist China and the United States, if we fail to preserve the peace.
So why, when we have, again, the Wall Street Journal headline is, Xi prepares China for, quote, extreme scenarios, including conflict with the West. When he is doing that, why is Team Biden desperate to get a meeting with him?
I mean, why was France and Great Britain, Hugh, unwilling to marshal the power and the will to stop the Kaiser? Why did the powers not deter Germany in the 1920s as it rebuilt, well before Hitler came to power in the 1930s? Just again, I mean, peace does not preserve itself. It takes a preponderance of power in the nation or a coalition of nations to deter an aggressive and expansionist dictatorship. And Joe Biden and his team is repeating the exact same mistakes that we've seen throughout history. And the cost will be grave and unprecedented if deterrence fails against China.
Is there any way around the debt limit deal caps on defense spending, Senator?
Well, I suspect later this year we will need at a minimum to replenish the stockpiles that we have sent to Ukraine and to Taiwan both. Remember, there's two ways that we can support foreign nations. One is through helping them purchase weapons directly from our defense industry, the Lockheeds and the Raytheon, Northrop Grumman's of the world. Second is taking stuff off of our proverbial shelf and giving it to them. That's called presidential drawdown authority. And when we do that, as we've done before for Ukraine or Taiwan or other nations, we have to replenish our own stockpiles. So that at a minimum will be necessary. And the good news there is we're giving them equipment and munitions that are several years old, and we'll be getting the very best cutting edge, latest upgraded technology. So at a minimum, that'll be necessary at some point this year. Hopefully we'll be able to do more than that, but that's what we'll do at a minimum, I hope.
All right, last question. What do you make of the Ukraine offensive? Because the reporting on it is very sketchy because it's obviously not a static situation, but what is your estimate of it? We have a minute, Senator.
Well, you're right. The reporting is mixed. Some of that is probably false reporting from Russia trying to put the best spin on it. But so far, it looks like the Ukrainians are fighting well. I don't think they've committed fully their main effort yet. That's not surprising. They're engaging in some early probing or shaping operations. But, I'm certainly rooting for every Ukrainian soldier out on the front line of a breakthrough in Russian defensive lines to retake all of their territory and to eject Russia from Ukrainian soil so they can govern their own land and their own peoples and live peacefully and have stability once again in Europe.
Senator Cotton, always good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me. Senator Tom Cotton, follow him on Twitter at SendTomCotton.